Europe, the cradle of civilization, stability, innovation, and prosperity. A continent that's home to some of the world's most iconic nations. But beneath its picturesque landscapes and centuries-old cities, something unsettling is brewing. What if I told you that these powerful nations, once seen as the pillars of Europe, are now facing crises that could shake the very foundations of the continent? From economic turmoil to political chaos, from social unrest to demographic disasters, Europe is staring at a storm it might not be ready to weather. Imagine what happens when the very countries we rely on to hold the Union together begin to falter. Could the unthinkable happen? Could Europe's great nations actually collapse? In this video, we dive deep into the top 10 European countries that might not withstand the test of time. From Germany's economic troubles to France's political fractures, from Italy's debt crisis to Ukraine's struggle for survival, the signs are already here. Can these cracks be ignored any longer? Stay with us as we explore the growing pressures that could reshape Europe forever.
At number 10, we begin with Germany, the economic titan of Europe. Germany's economy, once the engine that carried the entire continent, is now sputtering under immense pressure. In 2023, Germany's GDP shrank by 0.3% in the second quarter, officially pushing the country into a recession. For years, Germany's industrial sector, particularly the automotive industry, has been struggling to adapt to the shift to electric vehicles and the challenges of global supply chain disruptions. On top of that, skyrocketing energy costs, exacerbated by the loss of Russian gas supplies, have placed immense pressure on businesses and households alike. And it's not just economics. Germany's demographic crisis is only worsening. Over 21% of the population is already over 65, and by 2030, Germany's workforce could shrink by up to 4 million people, putting an even heavier strain on the economy and public services. This has created a volatile mix: political fragmentation, rising social tensions, and an escalating struggle to adapt. Germany's political system, once a symbol of stability, is also fracturing. Far-right parties are gaining momentum, while climate initiatives clash with traditional industries. The result? A nation that may struggle to maintain its leadership in Europe in the face of these growing challenges. Next up is France, a nation known for its rich culture, revolutionary spirit, and its history of unrest. In recent years, France has seen widespread protests and riots, most notably in 2023 after President Emmanuel Macron's controversial pension reforms. His move to raise the retirement age from 62 to 60 sparked weeks of strikes and riots, costing the French economy an estimated $1 billion. But pensions are just the beginning. France's economy, the second largest in the EU, is under immense strain. National debt has ballooned to $3 trillion, over 112% of GDP. Youth unemployment hovers around 18%, one of the highest rates in Western Europe. Inflation has driven the cost of living to unbearable levels, with energy bills surging by over 30% since 2021. Meanwhile, immigrant communities face inequality, and social unrest is on the rise. Politically, France is in crisis, with far-right parties like Marine Le Pen's National Rally gaining ground, fueled by public dissatisfaction. Trust in Macron's government is at an all-time low, and with it, the stability of the nation itself. Will France weather this storm, or will its internal fractures finally bring it down? At number 8 is Italy, a country struggling to escape the grip of its economic and political history. Italy's national debt stands at a staggering €2.77 trillion, over 144% of its GDP, the second highest debt-to-GDP ratio in the EU. For years, Italy has been stuck in a cycle of debt, sluggish growth, and unstable governments.
In 2023, Italy's GDP grew by just 0.1%, and youth unemployment remains alarmingly high at 22%. The country has seen a brain drain, with an estimated 100,000 Italians leaving annually for better opportunities abroad. The aging population compounds the problem, with projections showing that by 2050, nearly 35% of Italians will be over the age of 65, placing even greater strain on public services, health care, and pensions. Politically, Italy remains a house divided, with governments changing so frequently that long-term policy planning seems impossible. Meanwhile, far-right parties, led by Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy, are gaining ground, raising concerns about the country's relationship with the EU. Italy is battling economic stagnation, corruption, and a crumbling banking sector. Is its collapse imminent? Perhaps not yet, but the cracks are widening and the consequences will be felt across Europe. Poland, once hailed as a European success story, now finds itself grappling with a list of vulnerabilities that threaten to derail its progress. Poland's economic boom has been fueled by EU funding, but tensions with Brussels over judicial reforms and rule of law disputes put this funding at risk. Without it, Poland could face significant economic challenges. Inflation in Poland reached a staggering 18% in 2023, one of the highest in the EU. Energy costs have skyrocketed, and Poland's declining birth rate, currently just 1 point for children per woman, is putting additional pressure on the labor market. Meanwhile, the aging population is projected to rise significantly, putting the pension system at risk. Politically, Poland's ruling party has been accused of undermining judicial independence and stoking nationalism. Its relationship with the EU is increasingly strained, putting its future within the Union in jeopardy. Greece is next. More than a decade after its devastating debt crisis, the country is still grappling with a fragile economy, high public debt 171% of GDP, and ongoing social unrest. Youth unemployment remains one of the highest in Europe, and poverty is a persistent issue, with nearly 28% of Greeks at risk of social exclusion. Despite reforms, Greece's recovery has been slow, and its over-reliance on tourism makes the economy vulnerable to global disruptions. The pandemic showed just how fragile Greece's economy is when its GDP contracted by nearly 9% in 2020 alone. Politically, corruption remains a major issue, and public trust in the government is at a low point. Greece has survived many challenges, but its long-term outlook remains unstable. At number 5 is Spain, a country facing growing inequality and political fragmentation. While tourism drives much of its economy, Spain's reliance on the industry leaves it vulnerable to external shocks. Unemployment remains high, particularly among youth, with 27.4% of young Spaniards unemployed.
Inflation has caused the cost of living to rise sharply, and public debt has climbed to 113% of GDP. On the political front, Catalan independence movement and instability in the government have raised tensions, while social unrest driven by economic inequality continues to simmer. Spain's challenges are deep-rooted, and though it remains a key player in Europe, the cracks are becoming harder to ignore. Hungary is next, standing at odds with both its neighbors in the European Union. Its economy is struggling under the weight of high inflation, public debt, and energy costs. Hungary's reliance on Russian energy complicates matters further, especially as tensions between Russia and the EU continue to rise. The nationalist policies of Prime Minister Viktor Orban have strained Hungary's relations with the EU, and social challenges, including a brain drain and low birth rates, are threatening the country's future. Will Hungary be able to balance its national sovereignty with the demands of European integration? At number 3, we turn to Ukraine, a nation embroiled in war with Russia since February 2022. The devastating war has decimated Ukraine's economy, with a 29% contraction in GDP in 2022 and over $700 billion worth of infrastructure destroyed. Millions of Ukrainians have fled, creating a demographic crisis, and inflation has skyrocketed. Despite these challenges, Ukraine has maintained its resilience, but its future remains uncertain as it continues to fight both external aggression and internal political and economic crises. Serbia stands at a crossroads, struggling to balance its relationships with Russia and the European Union. Economically, Serbia is grappling with high inflation, unemployment, and dependence on Russian energy, while politically, it faces divisions and authoritarian tendencies under President Aleksandar Vučić. Socially, brain drain is a major concern, and regional tensions, especially regarding Kosovo's independence, could reignite ethnic conflicts in the Balkans. And at number 1, we have Romania, a country rich in resources and culture but held back by persistent corruption, political instability, and underdeveloped infrastructure. While Romania has experienced economic growth, it remains dependent on foreign investment and continues to battle bureaucratic inefficiencies. The declining population and aging workforce are expected to place even greater strain on Romania's social systems. Meanwhile, the government's frequent changes have hindered long-term policy implementation.
As we've seen today, the cracks in Europe's foundation are undeniable. Economic struggles, political divisions, social unrest — these issues are no longer just hypothetical, they are very real, and the clock is ticking. From the economic powerhouse of Germany to the war-torn fields of Ukraine, Europe's future is uncertain. Nations that once seemed invincible are now wrestling with the forces of history, and the question remains, will these challenges break them, or can they find a way to rebuild and thrive? In times of crisis, Europe has shown resilience. But the road ahead will demand unprecedented collaboration, innovation, and reform. The question is, will these countries rise to the challenge, or will we witness the unraveling of a once unified continent? This is just the beginning. The future of Europe is uncertain, and it's up to all of us to stay informed and engaged. What do you think? Can Europe weather the storm? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more insights. Stay tuned for our deep dives into the forces shaping Europe's future. Until next time, stay informed.